My name's Peter Claridge. I'm an Adelaide builder of about 30 years experience. I initially got involved in Undercover Architect out of interest as a client. We were building our own house, but also, we've built hundreds and hundreds of houses for other people. And so we're just trying to improve our processes and understand the journey from a client's perspective a little bit better. We speak to many people, but it's always good to get a perspective. And Amelia was putting out some very good content, very interesting content on what to watch out for, tips and tricks and design strategies and how to work with builders. And I just found it very interesting. So I've done a couple of her courses. We did a course in the early days as a client, and then we did something called the Pack Challenge, which was training builders how to deal with the market in a way that there's no tears and there's good, clear communication. So it was, but our background is we're building about 20 homes a year, and we've been doing that since, we're turning 30 next year. So we've built a new premises and we've just put on some younger guys, and we're looking to set up for the next generation now. And just wanting to do it as professionally and as relationally as we can. And I've found Amelia's content really helpful in that. I've been able to use her content to upskill myself in some approaches to clients, making sure that our communication is as good as it can be. It's interesting because we've as builders, we've dealt with hundreds and hundreds of clients. And some clients come very clear on their brief, very clear on their budget. And if there's a couple, they're in good unity. And then the other 95% come through with unclear goalposts of exactly what they want. A certain amount of of conflict in the brief between the parties. And we've got, after 30 years, we've got lots of sort of one-liners, but sometimes we say to people, we're not sure whether you need a builder or a priest at this point, because there'll be such a difference between the brief and the budget, or there'll be a lot of conflict in the expectations of the client. We've had to do a fair bit of marriage counselling over the years because, it's a big expense. You're dealing with, you can't build a home for yourself, a dream home for yourself, unless you work out who do we want to be in the future, how do we want to live, how many kids do we propose having, how do we want to entertain, what is the life cycle of the home, is it investment, is it, and so you have to think about a whole lot of life issues that don't normally come up in conversation. And so it does press triggers on, I want a dog. Well, I don't want a dog. One person's a gardener, the other person wants easy care. Somebody wants to make provision for mum to come and live with us. Someone else would rather die before letting them. And so you're dealing with a lot of quite high EQ. It's not just the technical side, it's the understanding of the people. We're building homes for people. So, that's been the interesting thing. And to avoid committing people to contract and so forth until a lot of those variables, all of them, are sorted out, which is where Undercover Architects had some really good things to say about putting a team together and getting the documentation bulletproof before we're trying to go to contract. There's a strategy in the building trade called get them off the street. And it means we don't care how rubbish the documentation is. If we can get you to go to contract, at that point, it's a good cop, bad cop situation. And good cop has signed them up, and then bad cop, being the building department and the estimating department, get involved, and it's variation. And it always ends up in tears. And when you're speaking to people at a dinner party and you get the cautionary tales, most of it comes down to communication, unforeseen expenses, not having a really good picture of what they were buying in the first place. So Undercover Architect is sort of pretty much saying that getting the brief right, getting the design really right, and getting the documentation bulletproof allows you to go to a builder and have a much more meaningful conversation. It's a much more helpful conversation because you're clear on your foundations. There's no other industry other than the building industry that I can think of that would be trying to sign people up in a $500,000 or $1 million or $300,000 project with very loose specifications. You wouldn't even buy a meal that way. And yet people are making these massive expenditures without really fully understanding what they're buying. So we're trying to reverse engineer that. We take some money from people early. We don't actually make any money out of it. We just try and recover our consulting costs to the people that we're hiring. And we try and get the design right. And then the second stage of that, we'll try and get full development approval with engineering and glazing and insulation and foundations and steel work and all the government levies. We'll try and get that through so that the whole thing has got a beautiful red bow on it. Every tap, every tile selected, clearly understood with pretty pictures. At that point, if we haven't managed to get a client to believe that we're the right builder, they're free to walk and take the documentation with them. Hopefully by that point, on our merits, we've worked well with them and it goes to project. But we've separated that out now. We do that effectively as a consultant, so that, and this was part of Amelia's influence in there to work with clients to specify everything really, really clearly, so that by the time they go to contract, they know exactly what they're buying. There's no tears, there's no surprises. It's a once a week cup of tea on site and enjoying the process rather than endless redesign, conflict on the run, variations on the run, which never ends up well. Not very many people enjoy that. So yeah, so the Undercover Architect, influence has been to encourage us to keep going with that strategy of getting the design and documentation and client brief and client communication really right all the way through before we even ask for our building commitment. So yeah, that I guess that's the main thing that we've taken away from reading Amelia's stuff over the years. It's very interesting. Our situation is very interesting because we are building an investment home and our dream home at the same time. Yes, so we're building our own home at the same time as building lots of homes for other people. And it's been interesting to take the builder hat off and put the client hat on. And we've been hopeless at it. As soon as the emotion comes in and the personal implications of design and how do we want to live, and what is our life going to look like in say 5 or 10 years? How do we build this home to suit ourselves for the long term? And we've had to hire a really good interior designer to work with us, a good designer, get the right consulting team. And my wife and I have been on Pinterest and on House trying to put together our own brief, and we ended up having to get artists' impressions done. We couldn't picture it. We settled the floor plan, but then we ended up with we tried a glass box look, and then we didn't like it. We tried a Hamptons look, we didn't like it, and then we ended up with we're calling it coastal farmhouse, which is mixed materials. There's lots of natural materials. But it took us 6 months, and I'm a builder. I've been designing houses for other people for 30 years. But when it was our own home and the emotion was involved and the kids got involved and, the plans are sitting on the table and the next door neighbors come in, everybody has an opinion on what you ought to be building. It was really interesting to take the builder's hat off and put the client's hat on. It's not as easy as it looks to design and build a beautiful home. But that extra effort that you put in by putting the team together early and working with them and allowing it to take how long it takes, obviously there's holding costs on the property and so forth. It's not easy to do that, but we love the design now. We're half constructed and we're walking around and going, oh, how amazing it is. And we're really excited and it's a positive experience. If we rush through, and we're railroaded by consultants rather than allowing the process to take how it takes, it would have been a bad decision for us. So, yeah, just to answer your question about how's it been, it's been quite challenging. It's a challenging thing to start with a blank sheet of paper, a general idea of budget, a general idea of brief, and to take that through the steps like a military campaign to arrive at a set of documentations where every decision is made. You're very clear on what you are buying. The budget is within your limitations because we're not trying to get people to spend more than they can afford. That's not a good life decision for people to get heavily indebted. So we do try and make sure that our clients are very clear on their budget so that we don't overpitch it. All that involved is quite a tricky thing. You have to have a team that you trust. They have to be, so I'm all in favour of people doing their research very thoroughly before they give the keys to a designer or a builder. And when they give the keys to a designer, to make sure that the designer is in a team with a good engineer, a great interior designer, a good builder, so that it's a very interactive process with the clients. So that's the thing that was fun for us. We had all those people around the table, and it was a good cooperative, collaborative, conversation, and we've ended up with a great outcome. So but it's not, for somebody that's somebody who's got 30 years. I was off the tools. I was a carpenter, and I've been doing this for 30 years, and I still found it hard. We have a lot of experience in the industry, but I worked through some of the material that we had from Undercover Architect quite thoroughly when we were looking to move through this, just to understand, from the homeowner's point of view, what the best pathways were. And I think it influenced us to put a team together early rather than just deal with design work in isolation. As soon as we got the floor plan down, we called in our selections consultant, and she was amazing, and she did helped us to get the textures right and the elevations right. And then early on, we brought in the engineer because there was about 3 ways of building it, and the engineer came up with a great way of. We had a rake ceiling area, we had an upper level overhanging a section in the raked area. It was quite tricky. But the engineer came up with a really good methodology of building a tall steel frame and hanging the upper level off the top frame rather than supporting it from underneath. So we ended up with a really nice open plan design. There was a lot of benefits in setting up that conversation early. So we're doing that as builders. We're actually jumping on those panels a bit for other people, and we say, well, we're happy to jump on it for free, as to give our opinions. But then if it goes to the point of wanting costings, we're actually doing that at a fixed no obligation fee, just to come up with the right budget parameters for them. So you don't want to be doing that after 12 months and 30 grand with an architect. You don't want to be throwing that documentation away after that investment. You really want to be putting it together piece by piece and not having to undo what you've already done. And what we find with a lot of tender panels, we'll get architectural drawings, and in some cases, the client spent $50,000 to $100,000 and they've got full development approval, and they get 3 builders quotes and they're over budget. They get 3 more and they're over budget, and in the end, the whole thing goes in the bin. About 2 out of 3 architectural projects are never built. They're so far off brief, and the architect's gone, well, what do you want? And they draw up what the client wants. But what we want changes once we know how much it costs. So every decision has got a technical and an architectural and a financial implication, and we can't really lock in a decision until we understand all of those facets. And so, getting that team around together so that you can answer the technical and the financial and the architectural questions as you go through in a progression is a really good strategy. And that's I guess what we've learned. That's helped our thinking with Undercover Architect, because Amelia has been very, very, very good at communicating the benefits of building a respectful, competent team, for the owners to take control of the process, get very thorough with their brief, very clear on their budget, and then work with a team of professionals, paid if necessary, but to make sure that when it comes together, it's not just amazing to look at. Everybody can design an amazing, well, not everybody. There are a lot of people that can design an amazing building, but it doesn't mean it's going to come in at the right price. And it doesn't mean that it might have wow factor, but it doesn't mean it's practical, and it doesn't mean it's technically well put together. So in the team, we call it a zone defense. We sort of go, this is a situation we need a zone defense. Let's call the team in. Let's call the designer, and we'll have 3 or 4 designers, and we'll try and get the ones that are the right fit for projects. So we know if it's a pole home, we'll go to a particular guy. If it's a rammed earth home, we've got another guy who's very good in designing rammed earth. And so you develop your team and bring in the right team for the right client, for the project and the right client. So, and sometimes you just know that a particular team is going to connect well from a relational and a personality point of view. And so if you can get that team together early, it seems like it's a slower way to go, but I think that you actually get to hand over quicker because you're not having to undo what you did with the previous guy. Why do we decide to invest in the courses? There's an old saying that if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Right? The cost of ignorance in my industry is astronomical. It's off the charts, and it's heartbreaking and time-consuming and very frustrating. So any education that you can get when you're building a custom home and you're investing, for a lot of people, it's the biggest purchase they'll ever make. The cost of Amelia's courses are peanuts compared to the benefit that you'll get out of them. And I defy anybody not to actually make money out of doing her courses. But it's the speed through the process and the better outcome, the less conflict, the clearer communication. It's all so important. But you will actually, the strategies of doing things in a disciplined way will save people money. Like we've made money out of doing the courses we've done with Amelia. She's a profit center for us. But to save money, there is a lot of free content out there, and we do also access that. And it's interesting. But Amelia's put her courses together in such a professional way, and they're very, very easy to access. There's the tools and the tips with it. You learn more than, off the charts, more than the cost of the course. Cost of the course is almost irrelevant, given the fact that, you're about to spend $500,000 or $1 million on a home. To train yourself up is so, so important. And also, it's not just that, it's also, we don't know what we don't know. To put the right team together, a team that work well together and will tell you the truth and not try and commit you to contracts before you're ready to, go to contract and the decisions are made. It's supposed to be fun. We talk about building the dream home like it's supposed to be fun, but you talk to people at dinner parties, it's often not fun. It's often a catastrophe. So it's important to get the strategy right and to get fully informed. And Undercover Architect has been fantastic. I don't know of a better resource than Undercover Architect in getting that done. There's really a relational component to this where We've told so many people over the years, please don't build. Please don't try and do this. What you are trying to do, you're massively underfunded. You're going to kill yourselves trying to do this. Just have a holiday, take a breath, save up for a couple of years, or let's work on bringing the home size down. You know, our biggest difficulty is people wanting to build McMansions. Lots of area, not much architectural merit, over budget, and they end up sort of trying to live in a warehouse. The biggest problem we have from a brief point of view is helping people to go, what about multi-use spaces? What about designing the house for the 350 days that you're going to live in it rather than the 4 days of Christmas and Easter, when you've got family? How about we try and bring this back to where it's going to be beautiful to live in the vast majority of the time, and maybe at Christmas we'll open the doors and use the alfresco rather than trying to design the whole house 300 grand over budget and 150 square meters more than you need. This whole conversation is quite difficult for some families, but if they have that conversation this side of engaging a builder or signing a building contract, it allows that to be done in a fairly low damage, fairly low stake environment, rather than a lot of that being done on the run where the selections were done poorly. Now we've done them, we're 50 grand over budget, and now we're feeling massive stress. Better to find that out before you've committed to a builder. Better to find that out through a process like Undercover Architect, to go, you know what, now that we understand the facts, we shouldn't be doing this, or the timing is not right, or in some situations, the architectural conflict is so high level that we kind of go, let's just pause it for a while. There's all sorts of ways of taking the pressure out of a situation, providing that you haven't gone to contract. As soon as you've gone to contract and the builder is harassing for decisions and stuff on the run, that is not fun. That is not funny for anybody. And it's generally causes, unforeseen variations and so forth. So if we breathe through the preliminaries, take a very strategic and systematic pathway, we put the right team together so that we're getting good, sound professional advice. At that point, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and it'll come together well. And if not, we'll know early on before we've spent stupid money and got, we're a year older and nowhere near building, which is what I see a lot. Better off to get that initial stage done really, really nicely, which again, anybody who does Undercover Architect is going to get a good understanding of how to proceed through that process, put a team together, what questions to ask, what to watch out for. So by the time, they're sitting down opposite a builder, they've got a lot of clarity about what they need. So I came across Amelia and Undercover Architect through, I think originally through Facebook. And then we were clicking through to I was clicking through to some of the links on a Sunday morning over breakfast, just out of interest. And then I actually was so interested, I clicked through to sign up with one of her early courses, which I found really useful. And then we've been on they come up, they're very good at posting content, useful content. There's very little sales pitch with a lot of it. It's made, you really do get the feeling that they have a mission that they take seriously to help educate people. And a lot of that content is free, but the free content was so good, we've clicked through into 2 courses and paid for those. And the second one was the Pack Challenge, which was aimed at builders, helping builders to understand and deal with their clients better, and to encourage builders to act as consultants prior to contract and commitment, to get all the documentation and all the decisions done, and be part of that team. And so we've been doing that. It's been really useful. I read I just read a lot of the content that comes across the net, through, we're on mailing lists now through email, but also, they pop up on Instagram and they pop up on Facebook, all the usual Usual suspects, yeah. Because we have builders licenses, we've done a lot of courses over the years. We've done Green Smart and some design courses. Most of the courses that we've done though are designed to give a particular skill, like they're designed to help you estimate, or they're designed to help you design, more sustainably. Undercover Architect is probably the most holistic platform, because it's dealing with the, you'd call it the customer experience, the client experience through the process. In industry dominated by kind of A-type, driven people who believe they have the answers to every, problem in every design situation, to pause that and to go back and go, actually, we're building homes for people. Maybe we ought to listen to them. Maybe we ought to help them to work out what they want and what their dream home would look like. And obviously it would be different for every single client. So the process of actually communicating with the client to get the brief clear before we put pen to paper, and to ask the right questions, whatever. Undercover Architect has been, I think, has done an amazing job of putting that process together, the inquiry, briefing, strategy process together. We've not come across, I'm fairly widely read, I've not come across a better course in that respect. Definitely, yeah. Certain clients can visualize things easier than others. Some people, they can read something and get a clear picture in their mind. Other people need to touch and feel. And so in the process of making decisions, we learn, how that particular client wants to communicate, how they want to make decisions, and adjust our kind of processes to fit them, so that regardless of how they want to make those decisions, we end up with, with clarity and documentation. So if we as a builder, if a client comes to us and says, I just want to make those decisions on the run because I have trouble visualizing, then we'll stop at that point and go, well, okay, let's deal with the visualization issue. Let's get you let's take you to a similar home. Let's get you in the supplier's studios. Let's get some artistic rendering done. Let's get a cross section done. Rather than saying, let's work it out on the run, we'll reverse engineer that and go, how do we help you with the visualization and decision making? So in the old days when we would go, they're having trouble visualizing it, let's leave these 4 or 5 things out and we'll resolve them as we go. That sort of thinking would often lead to variations and delays and misunderstandings. So the Undercover Architect and the Pack Challenge approach is all about clarity of documentation, clarity of brief, communication with the client, so that we have a really strong set of documentation, and that saves us tears, that saves us delays, it saves the client's variations, it improves the whole relationship. So yeah, it's really critical. To anybody thinking of joining Undercover Architect, I would say that the cost of the courses is negligible compared to the benefit that they will get. They will get confidence, they'll get clarity, they'll get systems and structures, and it will be the best money they've ever spent.